excuse me. In this section, we are solving quadratic equations. A quadratic equation can be written in standard form as ax squared plus bx plus c. So what that means, it's in descending power order and it's set to 0. You have your zero product rule written here. If two things equal 0, then either the first one equals 0, the second one equals 0, or both. And then you have your steps for factoring. Okay, I'm asking you to do 3 of these. The very first thing that you have to do when you're solving by factoring is make sure it's in standard form. This first one is not in standard form. The reason it's not in standard form is that the 28 needs to be on the other side. So when you move the 28 over, you get x squared minus 3x minus 28 equals 0. Your first step for solving by factoring has to be to make sure it equals 0. That's step 1. Step 2 is to actually factor it. So to factor this one, the factors of 28 that subtract to give me 3 are 7 and 4, and I need the 7 to be negative. My signs are different. So that's step 2. Step 3 is to use the zero product rule. So it says either the first one equals 0, the second one equals 0, or both. Now I'm expecting you to do both because an x squared equation has 2 answers. So I need 2 answers for this one. To solve this first one, I'll add 7 to both sides. So x would equal 7. To solve this second one, I'll subtract 4 from both sides. So x would equal a negative 4. And that would be my answer, 7 and negative 4. Now that's how I write it in the classroom, but on a test I think they ask you to put it in set form, and that's what set form would look like. Remember, yours is multiple choice in my online course. Okay, looking at our second one, it's already in standard form. The powers are descending and it's set to 0. So step 2 is to factor it. This one factors because it has a greatest common factor. They both have a common factor of 3, and they each have one x, and the smallest x is x to the 1. So I can take this out. So if I take out a 3 and take out 1x, that leaves me with 1x left over minus 3. Now there are actually 2 different factors here. Here's one, the greatest common factor, and here's the other. And you have to set both of them equal to 0. So I'm going to set my first factor equal to 0, and I'm going to set my second factor equal to 0. The second one's easy. Just add 3 to both sides, and x would equal 3. That would be one of your values. But the other one's a little more complicated just because of that 0. So if you are multiplying 3 times x, of course to undo it you would divide both sides by 3, and the 3's would cancel out, and x would equal 0. 0 divided by 3 is 0. So this is a good answer, and that's what you would get. Okay, so if you are writing it in set notation, it would be 0, 3. Okay, looking at your last one here, it is not in standard form, so the very first thing that we need to do is make it in standard form. So I'll move that 21 over. Oops. So we're going to factor this hard trinomial. Now, I factor mine by trial and error, but I have some other ways of factoring it, so if factoring is still giving you a hard time, please message me and I can send you a method called bottoms up or grouping or some other method that you might want to try. But just message me. I'll be glad to send you alternate videos. So my choices for 2x squared are going to be 2x times x. And the choices that I'm going to use for 21 are going to be 7 and 3. I don't know if it works or not. I'm going to try it. So when I try it, this little rainbow right here gives me a 2x. And this rainbow right here gives me a 7x. I'm sorry. 2 times 3 gives you 6. So let's fix that. So sorry about that. So 7x and 6x would give me a negative 1x, but I need the 7, since it's bigger, I need it to be negative, and the 6 positive. So I need the 7 to be negative. The 6 was made up of 2 times 3. I need that one to be positive. Now the computer's kind of playing tricks on me, so I'm going to clean that up. I'll pause it for a second to clean that up, and then okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So I put my 2 and 3, and I put my 7 and 6 in, and I did my rainbows to see if I would get a negative 1x in the middle, and I did. So in order to get a negative 1, I need the 7 to be negative and the 6 positive. So I need the 7 to be negative. The 6 was made up of 2 times 3, so I need that one to be positive. Now that's not my answer, but that does factor it properly. So once I get it factored, I'm going to set 2x minus 7 equal to 0. And I'm going to set x plus 3 equal to 0. So I'll move the 7. So 2x would equal 7. I'll divide that by 2. And so x would equal 7 halves. In a hard trinomial, you will get a fraction answer. In the second one, I'll move my 3 over, so x would equal negative 3. Those are your two answers. You could also write it as a set as negative 3 and 7 halves. Your next objective in this section is the square root method, and it's actually really easy to do as long as you remember one step. Okay, so if you have an algebraic expression where you have an x squared in it, it means it's going to have two solutions. So if u squared equals d, what you're going to do is take the square root of both sides, and you have to remember to put you have to remember to put a plus right here. So looking at this light blue example I have at the bottom, what you're going to do to solve this one out is you would take the square root of both sides. But that's not enough. What you also have to remember to do is on the number side put a plus or minus. So when you get ready to solve this one out, you would have an x equals plus or minus, and the square root of 4 would be 2. So you would get two answers, x equals 2 and x equals negative 2, because you have to remember to put that plus or minus in there. Now here's how your problems will look. You'll definitely see one of these on your quiz this week. You'll also see it for my online class, of course. You'll also see it on your final exam. They're actually really easy to do. You just have to remember the one rule. Okay, so here's what you do. You take the square root of both sides. That's easy enough. But you have to remember to put a plus or minus on the number side. It has to have the plus or minus. So with this one, we would get 3x minus 2 equals plus or minus 4. And the ones I give you here will be perfect squares. Now this gives you two separate equations. You're going to take 3x minus 2 and set that equal to 4. And you'll take another equation and set 3x minus 2 equal to negative 4. So you'll just break it into two pieces, and that's how you're going to get your two answers. So solving this one out, 3x would equal 6. I'll divide both sides by 3. And x would equal 2. There's one answer. On this other side, I'll add 2 to both sides. So 3x would equal a negative 2. I'll divide both sides by 3. And x equals a negative 2/3. So in set notation, you'd have a negative 2/3 and 2. Okay, again guys, these is really important. Make sure you choose the one that has two answers. An x squared equation has two answers. If nothing else on your multiple choice exams, make sure that you pick the one with two answers. Okay, here's your last one of these. what you're going to do is take the square root of both sides. Remember, on your number side, to put a plus or a minus. So when you take the square root of a square, it cancels out and gives you 4x minus 1, and that equals plus or minus 7. The square root of 49 would be 7. So simplifying this out, you get 4x minus 1 equals 7, and 4x minus 1 equals negative 7. Add 1 to both sides. 4x would equal 8. Divide by 4. X would equal 2. Add 1 to both sides over here. 4x would equal a negative 6. Divide by 4. And x would equal a negative 6/4, which reduces to a negative. Let's fix that. All right, let's try again. Okay, so when you reduce it, you're going to get a negative 3/2. So your answer for this one would be negative 3/2 and 2.